Now let's talk about voice. Voice signals a certain presentation of the causality of a process. What is causing this process to take place as it's being construed by the author or speaker? There's actually 3 voice options: active, middle, and passive. The passive form is actually going out of use during the time of Koine Greek, and so you don't see a passive voice form for every single tense form. And so there usually isn't a distinct passive form for any given verb. And that's why in the paradigm we've got middle passive endings. So we distinguish active and middle passive. The best way to think about this is that unless you have a clear distinction between the middle and passive, which you sometimes do, then you otherwise just think about it as a middle form. So if you see these middle or passive endings, just think about that as a middle form. Some grammars will call it the mediopassive to signal that lack of distinction. The active voice signals that the subject is causing the process. If you had a construction like he hits it, this is active. The subject, he, is causing the process to take place. The it here is not being construed as responsible for the process. Now, if you have the middle voice signals that the subject is involved in the process in some way. So I'm just going to draw a squiggly line here where the causality is not exactly clear. A good English example would be, he sleeps. There's a sense in which he is causing the action, but there's also a sense in which it's something that happens to him. At any rate, he's certainly involved in the action. You can't turn this into a transitive construction with some kind of object. You couldn't say, he sleeps it. Actually, I won't even go there because it's something like he sleeps it off or something like that. Anyways, the passive signals that the subject is not causing the process. In many cases, the process is happening to the subject, but what you can say for sure is that the subject is not causing the process. A good English example would be, he is hit. All you know is that he is not causing the hitting. The hitting is happening to him, and yet he's still construed as the subject of the clause. Now, in Greek, the primary distinction is between active and middle. There are some passive forms, but generally it's the active versus middle distinction. So the way you would gloss an active is you try to make the subject responsible for causing the process. He hits it, or whatever the verb might be. The way you gloss a middle form depends on the verb, it depends on the context. Sometimes it will actually work best in English if it's glossed like a passive. Sometimes it will work best if it's glossed like an active. What's important to recognize is that the major difference is between the subject causing the process and the subject merely being involved in the process. Perhaps causing it, but only being construed as involved in it. So those are the voice forms.